Parents, the following program is intended for people over the age of 13. If your kids are younger than that, please use the YouTube Kids app.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Peter Bernard's Scary Stories for Adults.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. I'm Henry Lee Dogman, filling in for your old pal Bigfoot, who's hiding behind one of those trees back behind me and staring out at us. I am not. Yes, you are. Don't lie. Just ignore him. Today's episode is executive produced by Gwyn and Allison. Thanks, Gwyn and Allison. We really couldn't do it without your kind donations. If any of you out there would like to be Scary Stories executive producers like Gwyn and Allison, simply join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Today we've got one long Dogman story sent into us via our email at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com. You can also send us your stories in 2 or 3 minute installments using our voicemail hotline 804-LSCARY. But this one was emailed in, and it's a story about a run-in with a truly persistent and frighteningly oppressive Dogman in the winter in the woods. And this one is called Black Dogman, White Snow. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I once spent 3 entire days with the Dogman, or perhaps I should say I spent 3 days trapped by him. I was lost in a snowstorm, and the Dogman almost prevented me from ever getting out. There were a lot of embarrassing personal family issues involved in how this all started. My wife was suing me for divorce, and I was hiding out in a cabin I had bought that I didn't think she knew about. I had used it to have a place to go where she couldn't find me. Obviously, our marriage was a rocky one, and in retrospect, it made total sense for my wife to initiate divorce proceedings. I knew she was trying to serve me with papers, but she hadn't yet, so sneaking off to the cabin was my childish way of delaying the inevitable. I was angry at her for wanting to divorce me, but looking back on it, I can't recall why. I mean, I wasn't good at being a husband. I felt so constrained by the convention that I started acting out. I had never been the kind of guy to date multiple women at once before, but as soon as I got married, it was as though I were transformed into a sex maniac. And since I was out at the cabin anyway, I decided to invite 2 of my girlfriends out to visit. They both lived together and usually traveled around as a package deal. This case was no different. They both agreed to hop in the car and drive out. It was going to take them overnight to get there, so I set about opening windows to air the place out and cleaning up where I could. Pretty soon, it was starting to get dark out, and I closed all the windows and doors down, turning up the heat to get it warm again inside. I stood outside in the back, gazing out on a lovely winter night in the woods of Pennsylvania. Almost a full moon, lots of stars, crisp and cold air, scary-looking trees with no leaves on them, and then I noticed it was beginning to snow. I was getting chilled, but I wanted to watch it snow for a while, and it wouldn't have been warm yet inside anyway. As I watched the snowflakes, illuminated by the dim yellowish light from inside the cabin, flit back and forth and to and fro on their patient descent to my tongue and elsewhere, I felt almost as though I were on the set of a TV show or maybe some kind of a movie. It felt like a safe and personal reality, a controlled and perfect environment, like a TV set or movie set. The trees, the snow, everything seemed so perfect It all seemed as though it were created for me and existed for me to use however I saw fit. I would have those girls out the next day, and I would be the lord of everything I saw, sharing my largesse with my grateful friends. I was extremely excited and happy. I couldn't wait till the next day, and yet at the same time, I couldn't have been happier than I was at that second. What a beautiful place I was going to get to fall asleep at that night. And then I heard a cracked branch in the woods out past me. It didn't sound as though it had come from all that far away. The trees, in their winter bareness, gave the impression of not being very tightly packed together, and yet I saw absolutely nothing move when that branch cracked. It had happened someplace that I had no view of at all from my vantage point. I craned my neck to the side and contemplated shifting my position to try to see deeper into the trees, yet at the same time, I wondered if I really wanted to know what made that noise. Curiosity killed me, and I took a few steps to my right, watching as the positions of the trees shifted relative to each other and allowed me a different view of the woods. I still didn't see anything out of the ordinary, yet I had the weirdest feeling in my belly that whatever made that noise was standing right there in front of me, watching me, looking for it. Everything was quiet. It was just the sound of the wind blowing through the trees, making me shiver. I didn't even hear crickets chirping, and I was trying to remember if I had heard them earlier. It was so silent that it seemed unnatural. I decided to turn and go back inside, since I was no longer enjoying being outside. The entire mood of the place had changed and become quite uncomfortable. I inhaled deeply, then turned on my heel, returning to the relative safety of the cabin interior. As I moved away from the woods, an ear-splitting howl erupted from them. It took me by surprise, causing me to call out and almost tip over sideways. I think I made a face and a noise like something out of an old Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis movie. Ask Google about them if you're in the dark on that reference. I mean that I reacted like a complete idiot. That howl caught me so by surprise. It wasn't only that it was about the least likely seeming sound to hear over there, which it was, but it was mainly the sheer volume and suddenness of it, coming out of such an absolute silence. I couldn't have been more shocked by this occurrence, and I found myself out of breath, with my heart beating 1,000,000 times a minute. My eyes scanned the forest and the area around me. I still saw nothing moving, but now I was certain that there was, in fact, something there. Something canine. Most likely a wolf, but possibly a coyote or escaped family pet gone feral. In any case, it made sense for me to get up, brush myself off, and get myself back inside. Then I could go back to fantasizing about my self-importance and how I was on top of the food chain and all that. I stood up to begin brushing the dirt and snow off of myself when out of my peripheral vision on my right, a dark form inserted itself between my eyes and the snow that was over there. Quickly turning my head toward that direction, I saw what seemed like the offspring of a giant, black, Alaskan wolf with an immense silverback bull gorilla. Imagine Mighty Joe Young with an insane-looking, wild-eyed, snarling monster dog head on top. Then imagine its locked eyes on you, and it's tear-assing across the snow, headed in your direction. I ran toward the back door, but it felt like one of those dreams where it's so hard to move, it's almost like you're running through jello or something. I wasn't sure I could make it those 4 or 5 feet back to the door before Mighty Dog Young covered the 100 or 120 feet he needed to go to catch up with me. I ran the run of my life. Granted, running is not something I've ever been accused of being good at, but this was the best running I ever performed. I know this because time slowed and I lived each second as though it were an hour. I remember making lightning-fast decisions about where to place my feet, when to inhale, when to exhale. It was all so simple because time had slowed down to 1/10 its normal speed, and I had the luxury of deep concentration before making each of these decisions. I remember sliding through the cabin frame inside, grabbing the door with one hand to slam shut behind me, and I remember the dog-headed man reached out and easily grabbed the handle of the door before it had fully shut. This thing was 10 times faster than I was, and almost twice as tall. Its paws appeared to operate like hands, and it seemed to be able to think, which I, in my shocked and stunned mental state, clearly was incapable of doing just then. The door was partially latched shut, but not all. The creature was trying to pull it back open, and was finding it stuck. I tried pulling it all the way shut, and found quickly that fighting a tug-of-war against a dogman is an uphill battle. If I didn't get that door all the way shut, this big monster thing was going to break the door permanently, and then I would have zero place to hide. I could go in the bathroom, but the door to that was made of some kind of thin, easily breakable wood. My last line of defense was this front door, and I was not winning this battle. After a while, the dogman got so angry, he did this whole hissy fit, like he blew his temper and had a tantrum, you know what I mean? I just quieted down and listened to it. Then, it sounded like the thing split for the woods. I got up the nerve to peek around outside, and it certainly seemed that the monster had left, at least for the moment. Getting up quickly and seizing my opportunity, I opened the front door fully so that I could then slam it shut correctly once and for all. And as I had the door fully opened, and I was looking outside, I saw the dogman burst out from behind a bush around 65 feet away and charge through the snow on its hind legs for my open front door. This time I was able to easily close it in time, but I was kind of given the fear of God by the realization that the dog had been planning a trap to ambush me. Dogs are not supposed to be sitting around trying to think of how to outsmart humans, but this one was doing exactly that. I started wondering if it was a good idea to invite the two ladies out there who I had invited already. Then I remembered that if the dogman spooked them, it might only drive them deeper into my arms like at a scary movie. All's fair in love and dogman stories. So you can imagine my disappointment when I got a phone call from the girls. They were calling from a gas station. They said the snow was coming down too hard, and according to the radio, it was only going to get harder. They told me it was unsafe for them to go any further and suggested I hunker down and get ready to last through a big storm, because according to them, it was too late for me to get away from the area in time. Hanging up and throwing my coat on, I ran out to my car and started trying to rev up the engine. There was no response, it was just completely dead. I threw open the hood to see what was wrong, then remembered that I really don't understand how a combustion engine works. Looks like I was going to be staying in the cabin for the snowstorm. So now my randy, hopeful happiness was replaced with the bummer of a realization that I was going to be trapped in that cabin for some indeterminable amount of time, and that the dog-headed monster man was going to be outside for that entire time. Unless, that is, he managed to get in. Maybe that was his interest in me. Maybe he was looking for shelter through the upcoming storm. They say that animals can tell when drastic weather is about to hit. This could have just been a manifestation of that. Maybe Dogman was too far away from any cave or underground hiding spots that he knew of, and maybe the Dogman needed this cabin to make it through the storm just as badly as I did. This place was built in the style of an old-fashioned cottage. It wasn't actually an old dwelling, having been built maybe 20 or 25 years prior, but it was built to sell as a summer cottage, not as a winter cabin. Because of this design, the windows came equipped with old-fashioned looking wooden sashes. I went around closing and fastening all of them, wondering how much they were built to withstand a storm and how much they were built to look cute. The snow was coming down pretty hard by that time, and I decided to try to sleep. I felt like the more I slept, the less of this I would remember. If the Dogman got in, I was out of luck. Therefore, I may as well try to worry as little as possible about it. I didn't have anything there with which I could defend myself against attack from the creature, so I set up my bed, I pulled the covers up over my head, and I tried to sleep. I could hear it. Out in the snow. No matter how hard the wind blew, no matter how thick the precipitation falling on those woods, I could still hear it, just outside. I kept the covers pulled up over my eyes, because I knew that if I looked, if I pulled that blanket down and pointed my eyes in that direction, I would see something so horrible, it might scar the inside of my mind forever. I could tell it was there, so what advantage would I gain by looking over there at the cracks in the window sash and seeing it? Knowing that the Dogman is there tapping at your window, trying to drive you crazy, trying to get your attention, trying to make you scared and keep you afraid, that's all bad enough. Having to actually look at the judgmental, savage eyes of the monster, watching its blackness reflect light back on you hypnotically, experiencing that dizziness in your belly that you felt the last time you looked at it, that was just too much for me to consider. I was glad I was lying down, glad that I had my eyes shut. I felt that if I fainted, I was already in bed. If I had an attack of some kind, either from the monster outside or from the stress of the shock and the horror within, at least I was already prone and had nowhere further to fall. I was preparing to meet my maker, I guess is what I was in the process of doing. The dog thing would tire of tapping at my window and he would race around the house, barking at it furiously. This would cause me to shiver and sweat at the same time, and soon my bed was drenched with perspiration, even though the room was cold. I knew I was setting myself up for a bad flu if I were still around by the next day. It's hard to prioritize when you're scared to death. I was unable to sleep, but too afraid to get up. I could hear the wolf monster howl. I could hear it leap on the roof and stomp around angrily. I could feel its frustration as it was not succeeding in getting in the house at all. Maybe that's not what it wanted. Maybe it was feeding off my fear. If that was the case, no wonder it wouldn't leave. I had never been so scared before in my life. If that was the way that demon fed, then I must have offered it up. A grand feast. By the morning, the creature had to have left because I fell into a deep, nightmare-fueled sleep. Do you know when you have nightmares that are so delirious that even your dream self is worried about it? Well, it was like that for me. When I heard the sound of someone knocking on the door, it was bright outside and morning. But it was the morning of 2 days after that terrible night. I passed a mirror and was shocked to see how drained I looked. I was pale, and I looked as though I had aged 10 years in one weekend. My hair was falling out, and my skin seemed so thin that I could see my veins pulsing underneath. I answered the door, and the man outside recoiled in disgust and horror. "Do I really look that bad?" I asked, blinking in the bright sunlight. "Brother, you look worse," came the unfriendly reply. Who was this twerp? He asked me if my name was my name, and I said yeah. Then he served me with my wife's divorce papers and turned around to head back to his car. So much for keeping secrets from her. So the roads are clear? I asked, realizing I had no more reason to stay there since my wife had found me anyway and the girls weren't coming. The jerk didn't answer me. Suddenly I remembered that my car engine wasn't working. This rude guy my wife had hired was probably my one and only chance to get out of those woods before nighttime came back and brought that frantic, terrifyingly savage Dogman back with it. I was between that creep and his car in 2 seconds flat. I was kissing his butt and offering him the world if he would drive me back to anywhere reasonably close to civilization. I either needed to get on a bus or a train, or I needed to get dropped somewhere that I could hire a tow truck to come up to get my car. I really wasn't picky. I just needed to get to some outpost of human civilization before nightfall. I'm not known as a good salesman, and that's because I'm a terrible salesman. On that day, I became the greatest salesman in the history of those Dogman-infested woods. I had a lot to lose if this guy said no. I had everything to gain if I could get him to give me a ride. He ended up taking the moose head from the cabin, plus the promise of $100 from the ATM at the bus station. I got out of there with my life, and I never went back there in the winter again. I still own that cabin, and it's still a great place to go in the summer. The most vicious animal you'll see there in summertime is probably a raccoon or a skunk. But if you go in the winter, what you should expect to see is Black Dogman, white snow. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.